Third part. The air chariot battalion buzzed like a swarm of crane flies around the saucer-shaped airship bristling with gun barrels. As soon as the dimensional conversion wave crashed against the enemy's barrier, a white tear appeared in the air, but only for a moment before quickly disappearing, making the enemy impervious to attack again. If only crushing them were this easy, boomed a voice from above. An enormous hand knocked down the enemy airship along with the chariots. The place was the capital, in the War Ministry's spacious meeting room. Like the Privy Council Ministry, the room was enveloped in moonlight and blue darkness. The 5 generals of the air chariot battalions were seated at various sofas some distance apart from the others. To anyone aware of the discord among them, they might have appeared to be 100 meters apart. They all wore khaki-colored capes identifying them as military, and held staves bearing the commander's insignia, a golden bat. What was most eye-catching, however, was the chain of fire clusters hanging from their necks. True to their name, these nuggets of flame were burning replicas of fixed stars, burning at 6 million degrees. They were medals awarded by the Privy Council for valor and victory in battle. Over 100 such clusters hung from the 5 men's chains, threatening neither to scorch their skin nor melt their garments. They were shielded in a dimensional barrier, shunting the 6 million degree heat into another universe, so that it might never touch the wearer's cape a mere centimeter away. Even one sun medal would earn a warrior the title of hero. The noble army was teeming with foot soldiers, with more than 100 such medals, surpassing the records of even these generals. Medals for the brave. No society carried out this practice more diligently than the nobility. The enemy's barrier grows more powerful by the day. They refuse to be satisfied by the success of the previous day. Our military can learn from their example. The giant standing 2 meters tall touched the air with a finger. An OSB airship 10 times larger than the previous incarnation floated up in the void. But we have finally succeeded in creating a dimensional cutter, capable of cutting a tear into their barrier. The giant's finger made a slash mark across the flank of the enemy ship. The ship tore in half along the mark and burst into flames. Any complaints, Numbusel? The tall man in the bihorn helm growled and drank from the gold cup in his hand. He wiped the liquid from his mouth with the back of a hand. Blood. The contents of the other's cup were the same, as was fitting for a gathering of vampires. All is easier said than done, Brewster. General Numbusel answered proudly as if he'd found a comrade's error. The reality is the cutter is barely capable of creating a tear in the new barrier, and will not be able to do any damage on the airship or moon base. It will come down to a ground attack. Hence the reason why the nobility's braves have been secretly chosen for the counteroffensive. The matter cannot be left to androids. The OSB have full knowledge of the extent of our resources. Surely you haven't forgotten how our android soldiers turned against us in the assault before last. And what this counteroffensive requires are flesh and blood warriors, seething with the will to achieve victory, and a thrill for carnage. Then I suggest you hand over command to me, said General Vilzen, seated closest to the entrance. His entire face was silver, roughly hewn slits for the eyes and mouth. A mask. Ever since the generals were first encountered Vilzen in his youth, he had worn the same mask, albeit a different size. They could only surmise that his face had been terribly disfigured. No rumor or consensus on the matter existed. Has anyone who initiated such rumor perished? My 300 sun metal is second to none. The enemies I have felled exceed 5,000. Surely it is I, the OSB, fear most. An impressive number. The same number of fatalities you've incurred, I might add, sneered the white-haired man sitting farthest away by the window. Despite his white mane, the childlike face and high-pitched voice revealed this noble's relative youth. It was what was commonly called a tinny voice, yet the staff in his hand strangely suited him. Indeed, you have disposed of over 5,000 of the enemy. However, it is your methods that I take issue with. They were effective in recklessly shooting down the OSB airships. But while you were on to the next target before finishing off the first, the OSB crash-landed on Earth and massacred humans on the ground. To date, roughly 10,000 nobles on the frontier have perished at the hands of the OSB. A third of this fatality is brought about by your slipshod command. Now I shall take command of this counter-offensive. Damn you, Minsky. Vilzen rose to his feet, his mask refracting the moonlight like sparks. That's enough, both of you, said another voice, one hoarse like the man on his deathbed. The wizened old man had arrived first, and had been nodding off in the chair beneath the moonlight when the other generals arrived. One touch or breath might rend him in pieces, yet his eyes, now open, emanated an eerie glint that froze the others. General Brosius. He mumbled his name through his gums, not because he was senile, or because the other four had forgotten his name. He did so partly in jest and in part to intimidate. Hopping out of the chair, he tottered forward like a drunkard and approached the large table. I'm not yet awake. I would prefer never to wake. Perhaps you will help me. He waved his staff. Another miniaturized figure of an OSB airship appeared in the air. Unlike the blue and white schematic that Nombusil had produced, this one was a full-color three-dimensional model, an exquisitely rendered miniature. Crimson rays blasted out of its gun barrels. Atomic beams. One shot through old Brosius's face and flashed a brilliant ball on his right shoulder and fizzled. Another beam obliterated Brewster's face from the nose up. A ball of light appeared on the right side of Nombusil's chest. Another on the left of Minsky's chest. More beams shot holes through the ceiling and floor. Now, I'm awake. There was a gaping hole in the middle of old Brosius's face, the view behind him visible through the hole in his face. And when he tapped the holographic airship with the staff, the hole disappeared. A most rude awakening, grumbled Nobusil. The hole in his chest already mended. Now where's Gaskell? Old Brosius regarded the men and asked. He went to the western outskirts on reconnaissance last night, and was shot down. A rescue squadron has been dispatched, but nothing at present is known about his whereabouts or safety. It was Vilzen who answered. Safety aside, his whereabouts are something of a concern. Could he have been taken captive? Knowing him, he would rather have a stake into his own heart before having to endure the shame of capture, said Minsky, simple man that he is. The general grinned, though not so much out of respect for Gaskell's sensibilities. One less general suits me fine. Nombusil bared his teeth and smiled. So there are 3 candidates, and I shall include myself. And I, said Brewster, rapping his staff against his left hand. Smiling, old Brosius said, surely an election will not do. You will all attempt to eliminate the opposition, and then cast a vote for yourselves. In the first place, I found it odd the Privy Council has not yet appointed a commander. Does the Council have a candidate in mind? Minsky asked, his fangs gnashing. No doubt the other generals present wanted to be likewise. The artillery battalion was an elite group chosen from the nobility as best warriors. Immortal as the nobles were, they all varied by disposition. There were brave ones, and then there were cowards. Though the matter of training was left up to the individual, every last noble with an aggressive disposition recognized himself a warrior and entered the capital's training center. It was at the center that nobles were sorted and tested on their aptitude as warriors based on 3 factors: physical ability, self-possession, and belligerence. While this was comparable to humanity's conscription system, whether these nobles chose to become warriors and continue more advanced combat training was up to the individual. Despite the incongruity of immortal beings serving on the battlefield, the nobility had gained knowledge complete of supernatural phenomena known as the occult, even before they gained supremacy over the world. Phenomena that humanity had disdained as nonsense and child's play had revealed themselves as unmistakable truths. Among them was the existence of unidentified flying objects, UFOs. The UFOs, long considered nothing more than optical phenomena, had been aggressively engaged in infiltrating the planet, was kept confidential among the world's governments. The human world established an investigative agency, which concluded that UFOs were not merely engaged in observation, but laying the foundation for invasion. The nobility had inherited that knowledge. The enemy from outer space will someday bare its teeth and attack. The nobility prepared for this threat and developed weapons that took into account the distinct advantages of their immortality. They also concentrated their efforts into their defenses, so they could protect physical assets such as the capital. Thanks to advances in modern weaponry, hand-to-hand combat had been rendered all but obsolete. But the nobility had resisted modernity tooth and nail. Despite preserving the nuclear weapons once eschewed by humanity, plus an arsenal of anti-proton cannons, dimensional oscillators, and DNA-destroying viruses, they'd devised in the course of their war against the OSB. The nobility deemed these weapons as last resort methods to be deployed only in the face of wholesale slaughter and defeat. They instead concentrated the bulk of their efforts on antiquated military tactics. Their plan was to destroy the OSB's defenses, breach the lunar base, and then annihilate the enemy in hand-to-hand combat. Imprinted in the nobility's DNA was a deep nostalgia for the past, as a bird's-eye view of the noble world so plainly made evident. That they insisted on adhering to the ways of antiquity, even on the battlefield, might best be attributed to their psyche. If winning victory by plunging a sword and arrow, a spear into the enemy, was the measure of valor, then the air chariot battalion was rather the nobility's most elite group, and its commanders had earned a universal respect as the best of the best warriors. Thus, the prospect of a newcomer taking over the reins of command was hardly news generals would welcome. Perhaps an errant shot of the anti-proton cannon might encourage the Privy Council to reconsider, said Nombleson, echoing what was surely on the minds of the others. Yet a suggestion was only met with silence. Even dauntless generals of the likes of Bruce Colonel Perseus glanced up at the sky, as if fearing someone had heard. "Hold your tongue, Nombleson," said old Perseus, making certain to utter the blasphemer's name clearly. "The High Chancellor of the Privy Council, he is the sacred ancestor." "The High Chancellor of the Privy Council, he is the sacred ancestor." The face of the brazen general turned ashen. Chapter 3 End.